And welcome back to another episode of Casey Campbell's Videocast. I'm Casey Campbell with Great Lakes Post. And sports is not the main thing sports is the main thing I do, but we wanted to also get the news perspective of this. And I'm now joined by one of the busiest men in television right here in Detroit, covering the coronavirus and everything Michigan coronavirus related. Brian Abel from Channel 7 WXYZ in Detroit. Brian, I know it's your day off, but first off, thanks for coming on. And how busy have you been the last few weeks?
It's been insane to say the least. There's so much information out there at this point with COVID-19, and this is one of the rare cases where, so often with news stories when we're reporting on something, it's often a outside looking in, but in this one we're part of it too because our lives have changed as well. So I'm from home the majority of the time, and it's been nonstop. If it's not preparing something for air for our afternoon newscasts, it's keeping up with whatever the governor is saying about the state of our state on the various outlets, and there seems to be an update about every 10 minutes.
Yeah. So what is, as of right now, what is the latest update with Michigan regarding the coronavirus?
Well, just this morning, the governor was on CNN talking to Jim Sciutto, and he put it to her, will some businesses be open as soon as tomorrow? She was been hinting all week long that the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday press conferences would kind of roll out new information. Well, we've gone through two of them, and we haven't heard too much other than just yesterday, just a little hint that folks of a vulnerable age, 65 and older, will likely have to stay at home for a longer duration. Well, it sounds like she might be prepared to open some low-risk businesses as soon as tomorrow. So that's the latest news. At least that's what she said this morning. But we're not going to get those details, it sounds like, until a press conference tomorrow on another one of my days off where I'll be watching and reporting.
So what could be some of those low-risk businesses that you talked about that possibly could reopen, like we could say landscaping or something?
Yeah, it's probably some of the things that we have heard be thrown at the governor, at the pushback from the other side of the aisle, quite frankly. Landscaping, being able to go get seeds, things of that nature. So probably what we'll see at minimum is going back to the early stay-at-home order before that new one was extended, where there was some of the more aggressive approaches. So that's at minimum, but it's kind of all up in the air as to what it can be. We've seen some of the southern states start saying that they're going to open things like nail salons and hair salons and things like that, and I wouldn't expect that we can get our hair cut by somebody else anytime soon.
Yeah. What specifically, I know you've talked, I don't know how many times you've talked to the governor in the last few weeks. She said, you reported yesterday that she said that we're likely going to get the extension of the stay-at-home order. Do you have any idea of what that could entail? Could it be maybe mid-May, towards the end of May, or maybe even longer? What's she saying on that?
So what was really interesting is at the very end of her press conference yesterday, there was a Q&A session, and she said some form, and don't quote me exactly, I'm not quoting her exactly, but paraphrasing,
Yeah.
So there will be some form of a stay-home order for quite a long time. And if you take some of the reporting from national outlets and things of that nature, you start to get a picture that what she probably means is that there are going to be some form of restrictions on us, some form of limits until there's a vaccine, quite frankly. And how long that is, that's up in the air. The CDC and Dr. Fauci has said anywhere between 12 and 15 months. But previously to that, from my understanding from the reporting that I've been following, the earliest vaccine that's been turned around has been multiple years. So that 12 to 15 months is pretty optimistic, it sounds like. So I would expect us to be in this for the long haul in some ways.
Yeah. The thing is, businesses are probably going to reopen. Majority of the time, is staying at home, but when it comes down, I mean, I know she's worried about a lot of other things, including the economy. I mean, the unemployment has skyrocketed, especially here with mostly everybody out of work. The aspect of that is, how long do you think maybe what she thinks has long this could last for? I mean, really, with the state, like the position that we're in now.
Yeah, I would imagine that there's going to be some easing of restrictions come tomorrow, right? And then what's going to end up happening is there's going to be this kind of dance floor scenario. I've heard it be referred to as, where a couple of people, a couple of business sectors get out on the dance floor, see how it goes, see how the data plays out, and then reassess and see if there could be baby steps moving forward, or if you have to take a step back. And the governor has said something like that herself lately. So, this is going to be a phased approach, or what she liked to say is waves. There's going to be waves. Now, what those waves are, how often do they crest? That's still to be determined. And I am not an epidemiologist to be able to give an expert opinion on just how long. I know when we talk internally, even at the news station, the only time I'm coming into work at the station is when I'm anchoring on the weekends. And that is because we put some pretty extreme measures in place where I don't see a single soul, a single colleague. Our microphones and thing I put in my ear to be able to hear producers and whatnot, all sanitized right before, right after, whenever we change out the batteries and things like that. And now I've been moved to a different set. One that wasn't being used. It was a green screen. So when you see me on the weekends, I'm actually in a room that is all four walls green. And so from a reporting standpoint, when I'm reporting, I'm home now. And I would imagine I'll probably be home for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's I think that I'm gonna set myself that too. Also, there's this state of emergency. She said that it has to be extended through April 30th. What happens if the state of emergency isn't extended? What happens then?
And easily confused, right? Because both the declaration as well as stay-at-home order is set to expire on the same day. The emergency declaration gives the governor some of the powers to do these executive orders. Unless you ask the governor, she believes that she's working off of some other statutes that in the Constitution, in the Michigan's Constitution, that would allow her to do some of these maneuvers, even if that emergency order is not extended. That's going to be a very, very important day here in Michigan. And effectively, at least what Speaker Chatfield told me in an interview this week, is if the stay-home order is not extended, if they do not vote to extend, or excuse me, the declaration. See, I got it confused too. It's so easy too, because we keep on talking about stay home. But if the declaration is not extended, effectively any executive order that was issued during that emergency declaration will cease to exist. So what would have to happen most likely, and this is talking to some folks in the Capitol, is that there has to be another plan in place, and it would be piecemeal, where basically each sector of what those executive orders were, they'd have to go through and address them individually, piece by piece. So what happens between now and the 30th, it will be very interesting to see if, especially what happens tomorrow, because if the governor comes into line with some of the proposals that both the GOP-dominated House and Senate have put forth, then maybe they'll be more willing to extend her emergency declaration. It's all kind of, there's a whole bunch of politics being played behind the scenes here.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is it fair to say she can't keep everything the way it is, or she's not going to get the state of emergency order? Is it fair to say that she has to do something to see, okay, maybe we'll buy into this, if anything, with that?
I think it's fair to say that she is facing immense political pressure.
Yeah.
To do something of that sort. It is very, the longer we go on, we all get more impatient, right? Yeah. And the protests will grow, the voices will grow, and the legislature that she needs to work with, if not immediately, down the road as we begin this economic recovery, will be less likely to work with her. And so I think that it's fair to say that she's facing a lot of pressure. And I think the longer that we go on, it'll be difficult for her to make a counter argument to a regional approach to those areas in Michigan that have not seen a significant COVID-19 impact as it has here in Southeast Michigan. Now, some experts will tell you that, and she will say that COVID-19 doesn't recognize county lines and we run a risk, and we do. And that's where it gets back to that dance floor idea of testing, maybe testing some of the proposals that have been put out by the other side of the aisle, seeing how those work, and then reassessing.
Okay. So, I mean, going on with what happens next, we know, has she really said anything what the plan is for schools heading into next year? Because I think when kids go to school, or if kids go to school, it's going to be really, really different.
No, she hasn't. That's a great question, Casey. And it's a question I think that is going to be asked of the governor coming up here. But, that's also pretty forward-looking at this point, when there's so many other aspects of the state and of governing the state that she's having to contend with right now. But as we get close to that, absolutely, those are questions that need to be answered. I know that the superintendent of Detroit Public Schools today has a press conference. He says it's for good news. Dr. Nikolai Vitti. We'll see what that is. Could it be something that has to do with what's happening next year? I don't know. My wife, she teaches as well. She's in a nonprofit organization. She's a culinary instructor, teaching students, marginalized women and children. They're still working on what they're going to do moving forward, and it all depends on the governor's orders. So it's hard to formulate a plan when you don't have the blueprints in place, right?
Yeah. And then finally, let's end with this. The governor, of course, is being considered probably, as a vice presidential nominee with Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a distraction for her? And also, what would happen if she did get on the ticket? Obviously, it would be Garland Gilchrist who took over, but what would happen if that happens?
And this is where I'm gonna show a little maybe a flaw here. I am not omniscient and all-knowing, so I don't know all of the exact mechanisms that would happen if she were to become the running mate for Joe Biden. What I do know is that yes, it has provided at minimum probably a minor distraction as well as fuel for her opponents here in the state. I can't tell you how many times, every single time that I tweet out something that she has done on a national scale saying, oh, there she is, just auditioning for the vice presidential running mate spot again. And she's been on national media quite a bit, as well as local, though. As you mentioned, I've talked to her probably 6 times in the last 6 weeks, if not more. And she's asked it almost every single time she's on national media. And it seems like her tune changes slightly every single time. She was asked it just this morning. She said that the job that she wants is the job that she has, she said this morning on CNN. And she said she ran for 2 years to be Michigan's governor. But then she was asked, would you turn the job down? There was not a no in her answer. And I invite you to take a look at the clip. I do have it on Twitter.
Yeah. Oh, and I just thought of something else. I know cases have risen the last few days. Did they say anything of why?
Yeah, Dr. Janae Caldoun, the executive of Michigan Health and Human Services, she did mention that a lot of this varies on when they get data in. So some of the data is automatically plugged in. Some of it's manually plugged in. Some labs are not processing over the weekend. Some are. So that's where you're kind of seeing some variations. But from what Dr. J says is, regardless of what those variations are, they want to get that information out as soon as possible. So that's kind of what you're seeing sometimes. So I know 2 or 3 days ago, there was an asterisk next to how many daily deaths there were. And a lot of it was because of the backlog. We saw that over Easter as well. And so that's why going beyond the numbers, at least what I try to do is always provide that website so that, the people that want to know more can go to that website, see what that breakdown is, because they do have individual breakdowns.
Yeah. All right, Brian, I know you're been a pretty busy person, and you'll continue to be probably for the rest of as long as this lasts here in Michigan. So, I mean, it's going to be a lot. This could look totally different when by next week, and we'll see what the governor has to say on Friday.
All right, Casey. Hey, appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Take care.